Welcome, and I thought I'd share with you a bit of a project that I've been working on for the last week or so. Really, it's actually, I was thinking, how would you go about creating a randomly generated podcast or a procedurally generated podcast where literally the discussion would still follow certain themes but head off in random directions and be prompted with sort of random thoughts. And the reasoning behind this, it's actually a creative technique. Well, I don't know what it's called actually. I've always just called it random input, and I've used it a lot. Like ever since I've been doing working in the creative industries, I've actually used random input as my go-to method of like if I get writer's block, or if I can't think of something to illustrate, or if I'm designing a logo or something and I just can't quite get things to work, I'll do some random input, which means I just basically put a random connection into the problem and just see what develops. And so the idea is that you'd literally sort of head off down a separate little track. Anyway, I stumbled across I guess it's a markup language to a degree, called Rant, which is a C# markup language. And I've never worked in C# before, but I started to play around with it. I was going to try to do it in Java, but when I've actually found that C# is actually pretty simple. So I built this form out of C#, which allows me to at least start the process of creating a randomly generated podcast. And what I've got over this side is I've got literally a bit of a rant builder, so I might sort of show this a little bit afterwards, just as to how Rant actually works. But really this part here is for the actual podcast itself. So of course it's I've got my logo here, which is actually a hidden button, which randomly picks from one of the 10 different sorts of prompts. So there's 10 different patterns that sort of collide words together to prompt about a particular theme. Over here I have the greeting, so sup, weasels and assassins. And if I click on this, it will then just randomly change this each time. So what's happening, waitresses and chefs? Or hola, peacocks and grouse? How's it going, Republicans? So once again, it's just sort of randomly strings together a greeting along with a noun, basically of either animals or people. That's sort of how that actually does work, once again using the Rant engine. In here today we'll be talking about, and I can then put in various ideas or concepts or things or games or whatever I feel like doing. And in fact, the idea with a podcast is that I would then bring different people in and we would then discuss something that is of interest to everybody, like everybody that's actually in that podcast. It could be anything. I might at some time sort of bring in other illustrators, and we might talk about illustration, or I might bring in other sort of gaming commentators and discuss gaming. Like for example, we could have Steam as a topic. We could have a specific game. It could be Pokemon Go, which is fairly topical right at the moment. It could be a politician. It could be Donald Trump. Actually, is he technically a politician? I don't think I would call him a politician, actually. But anyway, so let's just say we have different themes, and it can have from one or more, but we do need to have a starting theme. I can also even use something random. Like I can actually pick a pattern from Rant. Like if I just wanted to have like a noun as just something that would sort of come in, it will then just pick a random noun from within its own engine. And so armed with this, I can then start to collide these things together with other patterns, so similar characteristics, which sort of, the way that this would work is that I would click it, it would then come up, so the characteristics Steam shares with a harassed skydiver. So armed with that, we would then have to sort of start to discuss what Steam has in common with a harassed skydiver, and what should, if it sort of works the way it sort of works with sort of creative content, you'd end up with some fairly surprising discussions. Now, the idea wouldn't be to always try to come back to this, but really this would be the starting point of a conversation flow. Comparisons, for example. So Donald Trump, a straining pot or a screaming coconut? Well, I think it's pretty obvious that, well, actually, is it obvious? For me, it's a screaming coconut. And then I'd have to explain why, or people would have to sort of put in why, why he is a screaming coconut. So I would imagine that many of the conversations would only last a matter of minutes, that we'd sort of exhaust the theme very, very quickly before we then sort of select another one. And of course, if I click it again, it'll be something completely different. So Pokemon Go, a shimmering razor or a spitting jackhammer. And then, and there's going to be some that just are complete nonsense that just don't sort of work, like the best kept secrets. So the 4 unbelievably majestic tips if you're considering stomping bass. Now bass is a fish coming from that noun, so that's probably something that I probably just want to get rid of out of that list of things that we were discussing. Best kept secrets. So the 6 very smoking secrets if you're considering trembling steam. Once again, this isn't really working all that well, so we just sort of keep on pushing through until we found one that was sort of funny or actually did lead to some relevant discussion. Evil thoughts. So why steam makes people consider cracking a box, or why Donald Trump makes me feel like spanking a spicy zebra. So it just sort of, once again, it just leads to unexpected combinations that should start some sort of random discussion. So this is why it's called the randomly generated podcast. Song and dance would give us Pokemon Go is the inspiration behind the fastest dance craze, the skeptical vomit. Just what is the inside story? All right, so and this one, so it sort of randomly creates a meaningful sentence, but with random content in it. So skeptical vomit as a dance craze. Why would Pokemon Go be the inspiration behind, and what is a dance craze called the skeptical vomit? I mean, it conjures up all sorts of visual ideas. Express yourself. What does that one give us? So some hidden reasons why Pokemon Go inspires me to cackle from a beheaded post office. So not very funny, that one. Some hidden reasons why Donald Trump inspires me to hoot from an annihilated graveyard. It could lead to things. It could lead to discussions. Reminds me of steam, for some reason, reminds me of an athlete's skewered horn. Or steam, for some reason, reminds me of a ninja's silver epidermis. That's completely random. In a perfect world. So explain why, in a perfect world, Pokemon Go must rattle solemnly. Not very funny. So we would sort of be doing, so explain why in a perfect world Donald Trump should lather solemnly. Anyway, if we just continue on. So emotional response. Pokemon Go crippled by a bayonet makes me feel quite ashamed. Donald Trump painted a grungy white makes me feel absolutely lonely. maybe that's the inside of the wall. Who knows? Once again, it just leads to different discussions that just random directions with based from an actual theme. Best course of action. So the best course of action, if you find that Pokemon Go has managed to drain archaeologists in your morgue, is, so once again, that's probably not really making much sense. Best course of action, if you find that Donald Trump has managed to mangle quokkas in your dispensary, is, and then sort of leading on. So some of these aren't going to sort of work all that well. By clicking on the logo over here, it's going to randomly pick from one of the 10. So some hidden reasons why Steam inspires me to announce from a manhandled post office. I might have to change some of these. These are sort of first. Some of these are first attempts, and they're awkward, I guess. So Donald Trump slayed by a sword makes me feel incredibly bittersweet. Once again, that would lead to a discussion. Some of them may be serious discussions. Some of them probably be comedic. So anyway, that's the engine behind what I'm sort of considering doing with just trying to sort of start a randomly generated podcast and just see how it actually goes. Now, the Rant engine itself, if you are interested at all in that, it's currently under development. It's sort of freely available for people to use. I really like it. The more I've used it, the more fun I've had with it. I've actually been playing with it, as I say, for the last week, just sort of building these tools. What I've done here is I've gone through and just made a little, I guess it's a little editor that just allows me to sort of add things in. So, for example, adverb, verb will just give me a combination of intuitively smoke. So the adverb is affecting the verb. So purposefully twang. And I can then do like and then I can do an adjective and a noun, for example. So I can start to construct sentences. So say something. So smartly crunch a drooling wedgie. And one of the things I really want to do with this, like this is sort of more for directing questions, but I can see this being really quite useful for me actually professionally, just this aspect over here, with being able to very quickly put together a set of random directions if I'm actually doing something creative, where I can then consider something along a different line. It's a very, very effective technique once you actually get started. It's hard to get into in a rational way, and that's, I think, there's going to be the problem with trying to do this in some sort of podcast, because it means that you can't come in with any real, preset agenda. It's literally got to be something that just develops as it goes. Sorry about that. It's the problem with trying to do things while I'm supposed to be at work. Anyway, so this then just allows me to do all sorts of things, and some of these can be extended in different ways. Like smartly crunch, for example, could be verb with a .ing on the end. You can sort of see that I've got different ways to extend the verb. So I can go .ing onto that and say something else random. So sharply hanging an emu neck. Now you see there the A doesn't work with emo neck. It needs to have an escaped A for that to work, and I'll just try to find something. So a woody charcoal pencil. So forcibly dripping a woody charcoal pencil. It's really funny the way that you can bring these together. So intensely scrunching a poisonous bartender. I'll just try to find something where it actually does go to an. There we go. So lovingly denying an enticing hammer. So by doing the backslash, this is in Rant, it will then make it either a or an, depending on the phonetics of the word that's following, which is really, really cool. So there's all sorts of little things you can do with this to really extend it. For example, some of if I don't just want a general verb, if I really want to do something, for example, where I've got more violent type words, I can replace this one as an example with verb, and I can do the .ing inside there as well, and say something with some. So persistently shattering a satisfactory fulcrum. If I don't want the adjectives, I can do all sorts of little things with this. Like, for example, I can give it. If I put it curly brackets, I can put other things in here. So I can actually go, and if I put a bar, anything separated by a bar will actually will actually, it's got a 50% chance of selecting either nothing or the adjective. Now it means that I'm going to end up with double spacing if it selects nothing. So I'm just going to go there and go \S for a space, and then just say something random. So diligently mangling a coffee table. So once again, it's now dropped the adjective, or actively gouging a logical toothpaste. So it's actually put the adjective back in there again. But it's very, very cool the way this all sort of works. So if I wanted to have the adjective replaced with an emotional adjective, I can just delete that, and adjective emotion, for example. It will then give me the adjective for this one, so I can then just get so deeply assaulting a tree, with haste chomping a baseball, intuitively electrocuting a delicacy. So I don't know actually with the emotion intuitively. No, sorry, a hobbit. Actually, I'm still waiting for a bittersweet. That's an emotional one. Anyway, it's a frightened elf. So emotion once again. So terribly chomping a frightened elf. Sounds like Dwarf Fortress. Anyway, I thought I'd just sort of show what I've been working on. I've still got a little bit of work to do on it. You can sort of see some of these things aren't all that good. Most of them are. I reckon probably the first 8 work pretty well. But I do need to just tweak, I think, probably the last couple. But anyway, it's coming together, I think, quite nicely as a tool that I could then use to randomly generate and have different people come and discuss topics, whatever the topics might happen to be. Thanks for watching. Well, I don't know when I'm going to be launching this, but it's something that I am certainly having fun building and am looking forward to testing. Thanks for watching.